Okay, I'll make a start. Good afternoon and welcome. It's really lovely to have you all with us this afternoon. My name is Charlie White and I'm one of the educational consultants here with just2easy. We've got a lovely session this afternoon. We're going to be looking at how to create resources, specifically using J2E5. What we're going to be looking at in the session is two different types of resources that you can create. Interactive resources and more worksheet type resources. We're going to look at how you can edit existing library resources as well briefly at the end. And then we're going to look at how you can actually turn those things into a library resource and publish those if you want to. The session today will be recorded. So if you want to go back and have another look at anything, you are very welcome to. I've also designed the session to give you lots of practice time, so it's a bit of a workshop. So we'll have a bit of an introduction, then I will show you how I've created an interactive resource first and give you sort of 10 minutes to have a go. And during that time, feel free to unmute yourself. I mean, do that anyway if you want me to stop or slow down, but at that point, we'll have a good amount of time for you to ask any questions, whether they're related to what I've just shown you or if there's anything you just really want to know. Use that time to practice and get as much out of it and as much out of me as you can at that point. And then we'll move on. And again, we'll have a little bit more time to practice as we go on. So hopefully this should be a session that is really useful to you and that you can get out anything that you've really wanted to know. Do stop me if I'm going too fast or if you have any questions before then as well. And before I start, and I'll remind you of this again at the end, just to point out our competition, which is kind of the reason that we thought of running this workshop in the first place, which is a chance for you to win an Easter egg and a £30 voucher for our favourite resource that is published to the library between now and the end, well, just before the end of March, 25th of March. So if you manage to come up with some brilliant ideas for resources today, or you've got some brilliant ideas for resources and you can publish those to the library, you are in with a chance of winning chocolate and a voucher. So I will remind you of that at the end. All you need to do to enter is to publish your resource to the library. Nothing more complicated than that. So the tool that we're going to be using today, when you create a library resource, you can use any tool within J2E. That's not a problem, but the one we're going to be really looking at today is J2E5. So although you can create resources in JIT, that's not what we're going to be looking at today. And then obviously we'll be having a look at the library as well. So I'll start by giving you a very quick introduction to those two tools, but I am going to be working on a bit of an assumption that you've seen those tools before. So if you then, when we have that little break, want to ask any questions about those tools that I haven't covered, feel free to do it then. I can also point you in the way of any videos to get to grips with the basics of those if you haven't seen them before. So just a very quick overview of both. This is our library. It is a collection of resources made by teachers for teachers. There's over 1,000 resources in there, growing all the time. You can filter it by age of your children or subject that you want to look at. You can look for the most recommended or the most recently updated resources, or you can just do a search. So you might want to just look, for instance, for some resources about money, and you'll be able to see what we've got there. You can click to find out a bit more about a particular resource and open it that way. Along the top here, just to kind of get your bearings, we have the community library. That's where you can see any resource that's been published to the library. Your My Resources is any resources that you have published, and this is where you can add your own resources. Whether or not you want to publish them to the global library, we'll come back to that in a bit. If you want to make your own library resource, you're going to be working from here in the My Resources tab. You have the option to click on the star on any resources that you see, and that will save it to your liked resources. And any resources that have been shared with you will come here. And note that all your children will see is any resources that you have shared with them. So if you're working in year 1, you don't need to worry that that children who are a lot older, resources for children who are a lot older, they won't get shown to your children. All your children will see are the resources that you have shared with them. And that keeps everybody safe while they're using the library. So that's the library for now. We'll come back to how we use that to publish a resource later. J2E5, this is where we're going to be making our resources today, and it's kind of like our digital blank piece of paper. If you're new to it and you haven't used it coming into this workshop, I'd recommend at some point just going in and having a go, because the more you use J2E5, the more you see what it can do. At its basics, we can just click and type. I can never spell when anybody's watching me. We can add photographs, but we can also create really quite complex things using J2E5, and I hope that I'll show you a bit of that today. So obviously it's something that your children can be using, particularly if you're teaching children sort of from the middle towards the end of the primary age range. But actually you can use it to create things for any age child, and I hope I'll show you that today as well. So that's what we're going to be using today. So we're going to begin by making an interactive resource. So these are going to be the resources that you might create for your younger children who might not otherwise use J2E5 with. We're going to look at things like grouping objects together, making objects movable. We're going to think about the kind of images you might want to choose, and we're going to look at locking things into place that you don't want children to be moving around. So this is a resource I made a while ago, and the idea is that the dinosaurs move around and children can put them together to make 10. Now I'm going to test my math skills, and they can play with that resource that way. That could be something they could be doing on their own device, so you could have it displayed on a whiteboard, and they'll be able to move those little dinosaur pieces around and put them together. If you want to, when I give you 10 minutes in a few minutes time, if you go into the library and look up number bonds or dinosaurs, you'll find this resource if you want to have a little play around with it so that you can see how it's working. But I'm going to try and recreate this for you now to show you how I made this resource. And there's a few different things that I have done. First of all, for this resource, I wanted a landscape page. And in J2E, along the bottom, we have some controls for the page. And one of those is the ability to turn the page between portrait and landscape. And it's this rectangle here in the middle at the bottom. So if I click on that, it will turn my page landscape. So that's the first thing I did when I was making this resource. Now, because I was making this as a J2E, a just too easy resource, I have added my own background, my own little border to the bottom, and I will show you how I've done that. You might want to use this to add some pictures or a background to a resource, because we can lock it into place. So if I click in the top toolbar in the middle, there's like a little picture frame icon. If I click on that, this is my pictures toolbar now on the right hand side, and how I can add images into J2E5. The way that it will open up is to show me any images that are already in my files. So already have saved my personal J2E account. I can click along and do a web search for images, or take things directly off my computer as well, or things that have been shared with me. But for now, I've got this background that I want to add in my files. So all I need to do is drag that onto the page and then resize it. And I'm going to make that to the size of the page. Now, because this is just a border, a background, I don't want my children to move that around. So the first little tip for today, when it comes to making a resource for your children, is to lock that into place. And actually, first of all, I'm going to send it to the back of the page. Oh no, I don't do that. Fine. So I'm going to lock that into place. So if I click on the right hand side, you'll see that there's a lock button. And if I click that now, that won't move around. If I go into kind of view mode, I still can't move that around. That is locked secured into place. Really useful one for when you're creating resources for children. If you're wanting them to add to a page, whether that's interactive or worksheet, you don't want those bits and pieces moving around, the lock is going to be really useful. I can unlock it and relock it. So that's our first key thing to know for when you're making resources. I'm now going to add a title, and I'm going to click to type that. So I think I'm going to recreate this with rockets this time. So I'm going to write, excuse me, rocket number bonds. I'm going to resize that and put it into a font that I like, using the writing toolbar on the right hand side. And again, I'm going to lock my title into place so that that doesn't move around. So then for the interactive part, I'm going to go back to my image library in the middle of the top toolbar, and I'm going to add on this dinosaur. Just got the head for a moment. I'll get the bottom of it in a minute. Now, when I first did this, and the key to adding images that you want to move around is to make sure that this is an image with a transparent background. So you can see if I move him over the title, you can't, there's no background on that. That will just make it nice and clean when you're building it up. And I've just realized that's a dinosaur and I want a rocket. So let's go back. There's my rocket. So again, I've chosen an image with a transparent background. When you're doing, if you were looking for an image with a web search, you do have the option to look for images with a transparent background. There is also a way of creating an image in JIT with a transparent background. If that's something you're interested in, I can point you to the video for that to show you how to do that. So I'm just going to adjust the size of this for now. The first thing I want to do for this particular resource is I'm going to copy a few rockets because I want a few of these. And I'm then going to use the bottom, square in the bottom of the middle to just kind of scroll that up so I can only see half of the rocket here. And on another one, I will scroll this one down so I can see half of the rocket here. So I've made myself a little puzzle. So the next thing I'm going to do is add some text and create the little puzzle pieces that we had with our dinosaurs. So I'm going to think about some number bond pairs. So we'll start with 3 and 7. And I'll make those a bit bigger and change the font. Let's go a lot bigger. And here's our next key thing that I use a lot when I'm making resources, which is grouping things together. So I want to make it so that when I move the rocket, the number moves with it. And the way that I do that is by selecting both of the pieces that I want to group together. Oops, a daisy, not that. Like that. And I click on the right hand side again, back to where we were with the lock, I click group. So when I move that now, those two pieces will move together. I can do the same with my number 7 and the rocket. I click group so that they now move around together. So I've made those pieces. Now, the last thing I'm going to do to make this resource work as it is I want to make it so that in the view mode of J2E, those pieces are movable. Children can move them around to where they want to. And to do that, I'm going to select my new group. I am going to come to something called the details button, which is in the bottom right hand corner. If you can see, it's 4 arrows pointing away from each other. We can do lots of fun things actually, but the one we're going to use right now is just to make it select movable. And I'll do the same for this group too. And you can see now, obviously this resource is not finished, but if I come into this view mode, my children can move around those two pieces and put them together like so. The other things that we can do in there is we can actually set something to make infinite copies. I'll show you in a little bit some resources we could do like that. You can also turn an image into a bin, trash can, that children can put things they don't want in and they'll make them disappear. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes or so now to have a go at creating. There's two ways that you could do it. You could try and create something exactly like I have created here and do a copy, or if you've got an idea for your own resource, have a go at that in this time. Thinking about something interactive. We'll move on to worksheets next. I'm going to carry on making this resource so you can see a reminder as to how I'm doing it. If you want to unmute yourselves, Sophie, can they do that? Or do we need to set something so they can unmute themselves if they've got a question?
Yeah, I've just allowed them to unmute.
Perfect. So if you want to unmute yourself and ask any questions, if you want me to go over anything again, no question is a silly question. So have a go, use this 10 minutes. We'll come back in 10 minutes and ask any questions during that time that you would like to get a bit more information about. During that time, I'm just going to keep repeating the processes I've just been doing with my next number bonds.
Hi, Charlie.
Hiya.
We've had a question how you select two objects. Could you just show that, please?
Okay, so if I repeat that process, so when I've got my number, and popped it on top, so I'll line them up where I want to. Then I'm just clicking and dragging over the two objects together like that. And I can see that they've both got a box around them at the same time. To answer your question, can then go ahead and group them. I will also show you while I'm just here. If I double click on that, a little blue circle, tiny blue circle with a white cross in appears. That allows you to copy anything you've got on your screen. So that can be a really useful tool here as well. To get this in the right place, I'm just going to ungroup those two objects, move it to where I want it to go, and again I can select the two pieces and group them together. For this one again, I'm going to use that little copy button to just copy the pieces of the rocket to speed up my process again, and then I can just change the numbers, 6 and a 4. And I'll show you the process one more time. Grab my rocket and resize. Again, I'll group those pieces. And make them movable. Now, what I would suggest strongly is every so often checking, because I think that I'll find that I've forgotten to make all my rockets movable. So if I go click on view, I can see that I've got some of those pieces I can move, but some of them I haven't made movable. So I will go back in, just check that it's all working and edit where I need to. That should be working now. And the last thing I'm going to do with this resource is just spread them all about and mix them up so that it makes it a little bit trickier for the children who are doing the resource. Like so. I'll give you another couple of minutes and then we will move on. Give me a shout if there's any other questions I can answer before we do that.
Sorry, would you mind showing me how to copy the images again, please?
Yeah, of course I can. So if I select, this is going to copy the whole group. You can do it with just an image or just a bit of text. If I click on an image or a group so that it's, I can see that it's surrounded by that box. In the top right hand corner is a tiny little blue circle with a white cross on it. If I click that and drag it, it will drag a copy off.
Thank you so much.
That's okay.
Sorry, can you show us how to move the number? So if you're making a number, to get it on top of the image again?
Yeah, so if I type another number, and I can drag those boxes to make it the right size that I want. And then I should just be able to double click on it so that it's selected and drag it anywhere. So first click on it so that it's selected, and then you should be able to drag it anywhere.
Thank you.
Just adding some instructions to mine. And lock those into place as well. And then what you will need to make sure that you've done before you finish, as I'm sure you would say to your children, which is save your work. So the save button in J2E5, if you don't already know, is in the top left hand corner. It's the third red icon from the left little floppy disk. If I save this, it will save it to my files. So if you could go ahead and save whatever it is that you've been working on, and we'll move on. There'll be another time for practicing in another 5 or 10 minutes or so. So any more questions we can look at then. And for now, what I'm going to do before we move on to looking at creating more worksheet type resources, I'm just going to show you 3 more interactive resources that have been created in J2E5 to give you an idea of the different things that you can do. I'm not going to recreate them, but I'll just walk you through what we've done to make them. So the first one is money giving change worksheet. Now, this one has been created in almost the same way as the resource we've just made. All of these bits are locked into place, they can't be moved. But where we had that details button that we clicked on to make items movable, for this one, instead of doing that, I made the coins so that they made infinite copies. So I clicked on, I'll just show you here, the copies button. So instead of dragging, I can pull those as many times as I like. Now, when I'm doing that, what I tend to add is a little bin. All that is an image of a bin that I searched for in the web search part of the image library, but I then ticked that little box that said trash can. And so now I can drag any of those images that I don't want anymore, and that's a working bin. So everything else I did was the same, but instead of using the movable function, I've used the copy and the trash can function. This one, I've used similar things to what I've just shown you, but we've got a sorting activity, so children can sort things in. I've done it in the wrong one, haven't I? There we go. We've got some cones, sort it into the right shape. Again, each of these images have just been made so that they are movable. The last one has had a few different things going on for it. So this is a phonics resource. Now, hopefully you'll be able to hear my sound. If I click on the image, you'll hear some recorded sound. I'm going to show you how to do that in the next activity I show you. The same if I click on a letter, you can hear that read. But again, each letter has been made so that it is infinite copies. So children can move those sounds to sound out the word as well as hear them. And these resources are from a lovely set of phonics resources that are in the library. But again, excluding the sound, using just the same things that we've just looked at. But instead of movable, we have the copies button selected instead. And the background and the images are locked into place so that they can't be moved around by little hands. So hopefully that's given you just a little bit of an inspiration, a bit of a flavour of how you might be able to use J2E5 to create some interactive resources for your littlest learners mostly. Obviously, interesting things to show to older children as well if you're using J2E5 with them. We're going to move on to looking at creating worksheets now. So these are resources that we can create in J2E5 where the children can type on top of them. So we're going to be looking at a lot of locking into place, but I'm going to show you how you can make resources look nice by lining things up. So this is from a set of resources called Quick Writes that are in the library. I don't think that's applicable, but if I do a little search for those, you can see that there are lots and lots. There are different stimuli to get your children writing. So I will recreate that for you now to show you how I've done that, and then I'll give you a bit of time again to have a go at creating some of your own worksheets in J2E5. So I'm going to go to J2E5 from the Launchpad again and open it up from here. So again, the first thing I've done is add a background. Now, I will mention that you can add backgrounds from directly from J2E5, where we turned the paper between portrait and landscape a couple along. We have some backgrounds that you can add. Because I was making a series of these resources, I have a background that I want to add to the page. And I'm going to add that, just drag that again from the picture library. Drag that on, use the little boxes that appear in the corner to resize my background so that it fits onto the page. And because this is a resource I want my children to write onto, it's going to be especially important that I then lock that into place. They can then come into this resource, they can click to write. Unless they deliberately go in and unlock it, that background isn't going to cause them any problems. Let's go back and see what I did next. So I've then, again, let's get rid of this and this. I've then, again, given my resource a title. Just click anywhere to type, double click on it to resize that title. And I'm going to lock that into place. Then I'm going to draw some boxes on onto my page to add my instructions and a place for children to write. And I'm going to do that here in my writing toolbar. I have in the middle a rectangle and a square. I'm going to use the rectangle, change the colour of that. I'm just going to start by drawing a square onto the page. I'll worry about how it fits later. I like to make my boxes rounded, so if I click and select that, I can tick the rounded box. And again, we've got that little copy button that is still there while it's selected, so I can use that to copy that box across here. Now, when I'm making a resource, I like to make it so that it's really neat and everything is lined up. And we do have something in J2E5 that can help you do that. And that at the bottom is the grid function. Now, I think I had forgotten. I'm just going to need to unlock my background. So we'll come back to that, move that out of the way so that you can see the grid on the page. So I could use the grid as it is to line up my boxes, but there's an extra function here too that I like at the bottom, move that out of the way, which is this box that says snap. That will allow you to it snaps the box into a particular place on the page and just makes it easier for you to line those boxes so you can see. It doesn't let me put it anywhere. It wants it to get into line with the other box, if that makes sense. If you have a go with it, you'll see what I mean. So I can put that on and off. Have a look at my resource again, and I want another box. So I can copy that and resize it like so. Put it down here. And again, I'm just going to turn that snap button on because it will just help me to get it into exactly the right, so it's all symmetrical with the other boxes I've put on there. Move it up a bit from the bottom. I'm going to turn that off. You won't want to keep it on because it'll stop you necessarily putting everything exactly where you want it. And then I'm going to put my background back into place and lock it back into place again. Again, I'm going to want to lock those boxes into place as well. When I'm doing a resource that is like a worksheet, I'm going to want everything locked into place so that when children come and write on the page, they're not moving that around. So for these resources, I've given a stimulus for writing, so I would do a different one and I will have a describe. And let's change the font again. A perfect Sunday morning. Just little stimuli that might get my children thinking in the morning and writing. Again, I'm going to get those things locked into place. And that's the main thing I'm going to think about when I'm doing that flat resource. Now, the other thing I will show you before I set you off for 5 or 10 minutes is how we can add some sound. So what I might like to do here is record this instruction, make it a bit more accessible for all the children in my class. So the way I would do that is I'm going to double click on my instruction here, and I'm going to click along the top toolbar. You'll see there's a green button, which is like a little camera reel and a microphone. If I click on this and click record sound, I'm going to then record some sound which will attach itself to that bit of text as long as I have it selected. If I don't have anything selected, it will just add a sound button to the page for me, which is fine also. I press record. Describe a perfect Sunday morning. And I click add to selection. Now, hopefully, if I click on that now, and that's how we can add sound to our resources. It can be especially helpful for those resources that you might be making for younger children to add that bit of instruction to the page so that they know exactly what it is you want them to do. So I will carry on finishing up this resource and getting it how I want it to look and adding in those extra bits. And I will give you just under 10 minutes here to have a go, ask any questions that you might have before we move on to looking at how we can get these into the library. Again, feel free to unmute yourself, ask any questions that you have. I'm adding these little squares as little check boxes for children to add their own success criteria. So I'm going to use that snap function again at the bottom. And again, I'm going to use my little copy and paste button. Just get these just about in the right place. Always remembering to lock it all into place. And I can turn the grid off when I've finished. I'm going to give you one more minute and then we'll move on. Any questions on this before we do? Okay, so if you get your resource that you're working on saved, before we head back into the library, I'm just going to show you one more thing that you might find useful. And that is adapting existing resources that are in the library. So I'm going to take this example. And we have a set of descriptive writing worksheets in the library. And we are quite limited when we're making resources. Any resources that are published to the library, and I'll come back to this again before we finish, need to be free from copyright. So when I'm thinking of things I want to describe, I need to be able to find a copyright-free image. You might have a resource, a photograph you'd like to use with your children with this resource that isn't copyright-free, or that it's your image and you don't want to share it. So you could open up this resource and add your own image. And the way you would do that would be to double click. The unlock button will appear where the lock button was before. If I click that, you'll then see that everything on this page that has been locked into place is surrounded by a red dotted box. So anything I want to unlock, I just click. That's then unlocked. I can delete that and add another image. I've got this one here from my files that I could add in. And you've turned one of our resources into something that's then really useful for you. This could also be useful if you're wanting to translate a resource into a different language, because you could unlock the text and rewrite it in a different language, and you can take that resource, and as soon as you save it, your version is then saved to your files. So a nice way of making resources for your children, if you can't find exactly what you want in the library, is to take it, unlock some pieces and edit them. Does anybody have any questions about that before I just move on? That was just a brief note there. So you double click, you click on the locked piece of text or photograph, unlock appears. We can then click on again where we want to unlock, and that is then unlocked. So I will get rid of that. And we will look now. We're going to come into the library and look at how you turn those lovely resources that you've been making in J2E5 or in any other tool in J2E and turn those into a library resource. Now, the first thing to note here is that when you create a library resource, you are not automatically publishing it to the community library. You can create library resources that you can simply share with your children and with your school, and that nobody else ever sees. The publishing it bit on the end is an extra step. So if you have got lots of ideas for resources, but you don't want to put them into the library, that's fine. You can still use the library. It can still work for you. However, if you think, and I'm sure you will have made some really brilliant resources, publishing it is a step we can do on the end so that anybody else can see it. So everything I do up until the point at which I click publish is just creating a resource that you can use. That's not putting it in the community library yet. So when I click on the library, I come here. So remember, I'm first going to click on the My Resources tab. And then hopefully you can see to add a resource, click here. And we have a form that we're going to fill in. Most of it's fairly self-explanatory. Not all of it is required. How much of it you fill in if you're creating a resource just for you, your children and your school might be less than what you're going to do if you're planning to publish it, if you want to enter that competition, for instance, or if you just think that somebody else might really like your resource. So I'm going to create a library resource now for that Rocket Number Bonds resource I made earlier. So I'm going to call it Rocket Number Bonds to 10. Okay. I'm going to think about the age of the child that might be completing that resource. So I'm going to make that for 5 and 6 year olds. And I'm going to think about the subject that's covering. Again, these things are more important if you're planning to publish, because we're doing this to help other people find our resource or find a resource that might be useful for them. Click which language that your resource has been written in. Then these next 2 boxes are things that any child who has had this resource shared with them will see. The 2 boxes underneath are things that the child will not see. So I'm going to start by adding the attachment that I've made. So there it is. This will show me everything that's in my file. So I'm going to add that and click the plus button. I can see that's been added as an attachment for my students. Now, here's the slightly tricky bit. The bit to remember. At the moment, if I save that now, that resource will open in the edit mode of J2E. So that's great for if I want children to write on my resource. But for a lovely resource like this is nice and interactive, I actually want that to open in the view mode so that children don't have all the text boxes. They can't write on it. They can just move them around. And the way that I do that is to click on the edit button. You can see I have 3 different options. I've got task template. That means it will open in edit mode. Children can write on it. Then I have task activity. That's what I want here. That's going to open in view mode so that children can play my game, but they'd have to click on edit to open it. Or I can add it as a flat example. That would be if I just wanted to show the children something, but they won't be able to do anything with it. They'll just be able to see it. So I'm going to click update. I'm going to add Hello. I'm going to add some instructions for my children. Move, drag the rockets to make so that they make 10. I have the option to add some voice instructions if I like. And then I can add teacher notes and teacher attachments. This is really useful if you want to add an answer sheet, for instance, or just that little extra bit of information about how a teacher might like to use the resource. Probably not going to be necessarily something you're going to use if you're just sharing it with your children. If you are making a resource for lots of teachers in your school, you might want to add that for them there. And then at the bottom, we have tags. Really only useful if you're planning to publish it to the library, but to help anybody find it. So I might add things like Key Stage 1. I might add things like number. Don't think I need to add anything that's in the title. And then when I'm done, I'm going to save the activity. So again, this activity is still not in the community library. This is my resource in my library. I can click, I can set that as homework. I can share that with my children and the people in my school without ever needing to publish it. And if that's all you want to do with your resources, that's great. The library's working for you. That's absolutely fine. What I'm going to show you next is what you could do if you think that you really like your resource. But what we'll actually do, because we have got a few minutes, is if I just give you a few minutes to take one of those resources you've just been working on. Don't worry if it's not finished, because we're not going to publish it. But if you go into the library and try and create a library resource using that thing that you've just created. And if you haven't got as far as creating anything, just add any file from your library in. It's not going to go anywhere other than in your library. So if you have 5 minutes to have a go at this. So if you come into the library, j2e.com/library, or the library tile up here is the moving pink one at the top. Click on my resources. Click here to add a resource, then try and fill in some of this information, add student attachments, see if you can play around with that bit that turns it into a working activity. Have a think about what your tags might be, and shout if you've got any questions, and then I will finish up in about 3 minutes showing you and talking you through the process of publishing it. Any problems, any questions? Okay, so if I just stop you there, as long as you've put in the required information, you can save it, even if you wanted to come back and keep working on it. And the last thing I'm going to talk to you then about is publishing. So you would publish a resource if you think you've got something that other teachers could find useful, okay, that you want to share outside of your school. And it would be really, really lovely if we could get more people doing this. The idea when we made the library in the first place was that it was a place for teachers to share brilliant ideas that they had with each other, and help each other out and give each other ideas. So it'd be lovely to get more people starting to share things that they've got that they think other teachers would find useful. And the way that we do that is to simply go on this resource that you've saved and click publish. Now, a few things to think about before you do this. First of all, and the most important thing is this your resource? Do you we can't publish something if it's been a screenshot of another resource from somewhere else, for instance. Do you have the permission to publish it and everything in it? The main thing that you probably want to consider there is, particularly with photographs, are they copyright free? Now, you can, if you're using an image search like Google, for instance, there is a way of setting it to make sure you're getting copyright free images. The selection's not brilliant. I like to use a website called Pixabay to get a lot of my images. You might find that you want to use some of your own images, and that's fine too. But you need to publish this to the library. You need to make sure you have the permission to publish anything in that resource. Once it goes out and it's been moderated, anybody can see that then. So that's the main thing. Then it is just to have a double check that it's working properly, that you've locked everything into place that you want to lock into place, that you, 2 seconds, let's just let Sophie back in. Okay, there we go. Sorry, where was I? That everything is working properly, that you've set it to open either as that template or as that activity, depending on what you want it to be. Make sure that it's working properly. And this bit of text here that you'll get is just a reminder to think about those things. And then we click continue. And that then goes to be moderated. So what that means is me or one of my colleagues will have a look at it, and we'll then publish it to the library. When I say we're having a look at it, we are not judging. We're not looking to say, is this a great resource? We're simply looking to make sure that nothing inappropriate gets published to the library, and that nothing that is obviously that is obviously under copyright gets published to the library. We're simply checking for that. I'm not going to be checking your spellings or whether I think that it's a resource that I would publish, nothing like that. I'm simply checking that it is appropriate. I won't even usually check whether it's working, which is why, because obviously I don't know what you wanted it to be like. So that's why it's important that you check that it's working how you wanted it to be working. So those are the things you would think about before clicking publish. But I really hope that I have given some of you the confidence today to publish some of the resources that you've got to the library. Anything you've got that might be helpful to another teacher, it would be brilliant to see more of your resources, what you want and what you're looking for in this community library. It is a community library. That's how it is designed. And obviously we have our incentive, which is our little competition. Let's come back to that. So if you publish a resource before the 25th of March, our favourite will win an Easter egg and a £30 gift voucher, and that is for you, the teacher. It's not something that has to be for your school. It is for you to say well done for your time and that we really liked your resource. So I hope that serves as a bit of an incentive to be brave and publish your first resources. We're about to finish now. But just a reminder where you can get further support. So we have a presence on Twitter, on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. YouTube in particular, you can very easily go back and find videos that cover specific things. You can also find videos in the help tile on your Launchpad. There is a video specifically about uploading your own resources to the library. If you put library into the help tile, you will find that, and that will walk you through the last bits that I just went through about uploading there. And beyond that, if you're having a particular problem using J2E5, if you've got a question you can't find the answer to, please do email support@J2E. We pride ourselves on being as helpful as we possibly can be. So do give us a shout if there's anything else that we can help you with. Thank you very much for coming today. I hope that you found it helpful. Any last questions before we end? Glad you found it helpful. Thank you for coming. Right, if there's no more questions, I'm going to close the meeting up now. Please do email if there's anything else we can help you with at all. Thanks again for coming. Bye.